What's up, everybody? This is Post-Production Pi with SRLounge.com, welcoming you to another episode of Constructive Critique. This is where you go to SRLounge.com, jump into the forums, and submit your images to the Constructive Critique section for mutual community bashing. I'm just kidding, guys. We don't bash, we constructively critique. Be sure before you post that you read the rules on constructive critique, and also, just a little tip, when you guys are uploading your images, do not use the forum to upload the images because it will reduce the quality quite a bit. Instead, use an image hosting service such as Flickr and then just embed the link to the image inside of the forum. That way we can see the image in its full glorious details. All right, everybody, let's get started. We're going to start first with this gorgeous headshot by Anthony. Now, here's what I have to say, Anthony. I think you did a great job with this this overall shot. You like the Hurley style, as you mentioned, and you like to be able to tweak it to your own taste. I like the lighting that you set up in this scene. It looks great. You have good catch lights. It's a good expression. Everything is pretty solid. Here's what I think doesn't really fit. Now, you mentioned that this post-production style, basically the color tuning or the color toning, whatever. The color toning as well as the white balance is something that you tweaked intentionally. I would hope so, because hopefully your camera doesn't shoot vintage shots coming straight out of the camera. But here's the thing, is that I would highly recommend making sure that you're keeping your post-production style consistent with the type of shot that you're doing. It's okay to break the rules, when you want to experiment and stuff, but I don't feel like this post-production style works with headshot images, and that's really because of the style of photography that you're doing. You're doing headshots. With a headshot, we have a very limited focus as to what we're looking at. We're looking at a person, we're looking at their expression, their looks. Traditionally headshots are used for, models and actresses to decide whether or not we want to use that person in, say, a film or in a product shoot or whatever it is that we want to use it for. Now, with headshots, most of them because of that, in the past, most headshots were actually black and white. Today, you still have tons of black and white headshots, and you also have color headshots. But the whole goal is to really leave the attention being the subject itself, not anything else. Your post-production style draws a lot of attention to basically the skin tones. Basically, we look at this and we go, oh, it kind of has this weird looking kind of putrid yellow-green skin tone, and that becomes the attention grabber instead of her look and everything else. So I would say with this type of photography, this vintage look or this kind of green-yellow color toning doesn't really work. You want to stick with a black and white or color. Go with a very neutral tone that basically allows the viewer to focus in on the subject and on their look and expression themselves. On other types of photography, go nuts. I would say on this one, it doesn't really work, but that's my 2 cents. All right, let's move on to Foliage Barbecue by Thomas. Now, this was actually a really cool shot. I got to this and I was like, Foliage Barbecue, oh man, someone's gonna be taking macro shots of leaves, and I was like, oh, it's actually kind of cool looking. And the reason why it works is, let's go to Flickr and actually see the larger version. I feel like this works really well because there's a lot of kind of points of interest, not only the color, but also the kind of rust in the metal and just the texture overall in the image. You had a couple different variants. By the way, variants of an image are totally fine to submit, just not unique versions and stuff like that. Variants are okay. But you have these different variants, which are kind of cool too. It almost looks like the grill is actually photoshopped in on these images. It looks kind of funny. But I dig it. I mean, I dig this one that you chose. I think you chose the right one. Here's what I would recommend, is that I can see by looking at the image that the white balance and color toning is just a little bit off. And the reason why is because I don't see the leaves popping quite a bit enough. Like, the leaves have this orangey color to them, but instead of seeing that really pop off of everything else being neutral, we have a little bit more yellow-orange mixed into this background. We also have a little bit of yellow here. If we had more of a neutral color temperature, the leaves would really pop quite a bit more. So that'd kind of be the area that I would adjust a little bit, is color temperature, maybe add a little bit of extra contrast and pop to it, but otherwise it's a cool shot, and I think it has a lot of interest in it. Let's move on to portrait number 2. Now, this is submitted by Igor. I think we critiqued some of Igor's other stuff before, and this is a great shot. This, he mentioned, is a portrait of his girlfriend. I love the expression. I love that she's kind of gazing off camera. It has a very natural, candid look to it, and I love the processing. I know some people mentioned that they'd like to see it higher contrast, but I think it's absolutely perfect where it's at, because it really, the post-production style remains very neutral. It allows the viewer to really focus on her and not so much the overall image or how it's produced. I think it's great. The kind of flatter black and white look works really well for this image. Overall, you did a great job shooting it and a great job capturing this moment. Let's go on to our next image, which is Monumental by Brand. Now, this is a fabulous shot. I wish I could see it larger. If it was linked to Flickr and we can see it in full size, that'd be amazing. But it's an absolutely gorgeous shot with this reflection. I love that you've captured detail in the sky. Now, here's what I would do with this. I think from a compositional standpoint, it's flawless. I think from an exposure standpoint for the monument in the sky, it's flawless. What I would do is I would actually shoot 2 or maybe 3 exposures in this scene, and it looks like you're already tripoded. So you're going to tripod and shoot something bright for the foreground and then something a little bit darker for the skies and for the monument, and then blend these images. That way we can see foreground detail and we can also see the sky and everything, all the details basically revealed in the scene. Now, as you mentioned, you're going to crop out the empty space at the bottom. I would definitely say go for that as well. Crop that out because it's not really adding to anything in the image. But if we could see more detail in this kind of in the trees over here, and also see a little bit stronger reflection in the reflection pool where we can kind of see the stars and the sky and clouds, it would make for a stronger image. But overall, it looks really great. It's a really nice shot, and keep submitting. By the way, guys, it does take a little bit of time for your peers and for us to critique things. So if we don't get to it right away, just be patient. There's a lot of people on here, and I'm sure we'll get to it. And in the meanwhile, go and critique some other people's stuff. It's awesome to give as well as to receive. All right, next shot, we have First Shoot with a Model by Adam Coldwell. Now, here it's actually a really great shot. I kind of dig it, and I love this mixture of color toning that we have. We have this yellow light coming in from the sun, it looks like, casting this hair light on her. There are a few, I don't know if this is rain or what that is over on this side, but that's a little bit distracting. I'd probably clone or just remove these from the image. But this mixture of light, it kind of works really well. Now, what I would say is I dig the crop too. I'm not a huge fan of this little rounded border thing, but that's really up to you. I think that's actually part of the preset system, which we included just for people that do like it. But I'd say it would look a little bit more unique without it. One thing I would do with this type of image too is I think it works, this one would work perfectly with kind of a vintage look to it with a little bit of nice grain added to it. It looks like you have some grain, but I'd probably boost it a little bit. Now, here's the one thing I would change compositionally. Composition, I think, is fine. The only thing that's distracting is this big little highlight here that looks like it's coming in from the underside of the bridge. Now, this highlight's doing a couple different things. Number one, it's going to actually kill some of your contrast in your image because it's going to act like a flare. Number two, for the viewer, it's going to be a very strong highlight point because it's such a bright area in the image. And since it's right next to her head, it's going to draw the viewer's eyes straight to that area. The only other thing from a compositional standpoint I would recommend is with her eyes, we generally don't want people looking that far off the camera. It's a little bit too much. You don't want to see as much white or see more white than you basically do pupil like you do in this one. So bring her eyes back a little bit, have her looking to the right, but not that far to the right. But what this probably was is it looks like this is kind of a candid of maybe her posing for someone else. So who knows if you had control of that or not. Anyway, hopefully this helps. Let's move on to our next shot. Here we have Zmapp by Chili Wilson. I don't know if it's cold out there, Wilson, but don't be chilly. Chilly, you looks like you're, let's see, the upload on the site, lose the quality. Yep, follow that whole Flickr thing and it won't happen. So here Chili mentions that he tried to use the Brenner method and then he thought it was too weak, so he created an artificial Zmapp to give him a new set of focal ranges. Now, what I would say with this is that it's really not necessarily the technique that you're using. More off the critique that I have for this image is just a lack of interest overall. The background isn't really anything to gawk at. You know, it's not really anything great that we're seeing. It's very standard, and also the subject is so small that he's kind of a very small piece of that background. Generally, when we're shooting a shot like this, we refer to this as an environmental portrait. And the reason why we'd shoot an environmental portrait is because we want to bring the viewer's attention to where the subject is because it plays a big part in the role of the overall image. Here, not so much. Here, the background really isn't that great, and so I really would kind of focus in on our subject, you know, shoot these either portrait or landscape, but really kind of get in close, focus on him. We'd have a more interesting shot. That's kind of it as far as what I have to critique on this one. We don't have the image in kind of full resolution because it is a form upload, so I'm not sure about the overall sharpness and stuff. That could just be reduced from the form itself. But I would say overall compositionally that would be where to focus on, is really making sure that when you're shooting environmental portraits, make sure that the environment is actually worth kind of showing in these types of shots. Otherwise, it looks like his pose, the expression is totally fine. Everything else is good. Let's go on to this high-key headshot attempt by opticmemory. Now, this is a style that you used to see quite a bit of, especially with, you know, back in the 90s with glamour photography. You'd see this kind of white, blown-out look. This is definitely referred to as high-key, but I think the high-key that's a little bit more modern now is where, you know, you take high-key portraits on backgrounds that are white. The subject is bright, but their skin isn't blown out. Here, the skin looks a little bit too bright, and it is blown in some areas, which isn't something that I'm kind of digging. I'm also not a big fan of the selective color, but these are things that are very subjective preferences for me. There'd probably be a lot of people that would dig this kind of look where you have the coloring on the hair and the shirt. Everything else is kind of left to be this neutral black and white look. I'm kind of not one of those, so I might not be the best person to critique. Otherwise, it's totally fine. The exposure, everything, I mean, you probably post-produce it on the bright side, but everything else is fine. I'm not really super interested in kind of the overall composition that we have here. I think the best feature that this girl has is her eyes. Her eyes are absolutely breathtaking. And if I were shooting her, I'd really try and draw attention to that. Even getting some macro shots of just her eyes, as I'm sure it'd be absolutely gorgeous. But getting some really nice kind of classic shots of her looking into the camera and really emphasizing those eyes in production, not to the point where it looks alienated, but just kind of making them pop a little bit in production, I think would, for me, be what I would do in this kind of scene. So anyway, that's great though. Let's go on to the next one. And here we have Junkyard Shoot by Louis Sir. Okay. What we have here is a nice little shot of this model, and here's the things that are working for you. You have a great looking model. What she's wearing is awesome, and everything else is good. But what we don't have working for us right now is that we have this sunlight that's kind of landing on the side of her face. It looks as though her lips are slightly parted and her tongue is coming out. I'm not sure if it is or not, but it looks a little bit unusual there. And so if that's the look, I'd say you might have caught her at the wrong moment where her tongue is kind of poking out a little bit and it looks a little bit awkward. Otherwise, I'd say keep the lips closed or go for a smile, but none of this tongue stuff. And other thing is kind of bring her back more towards the sunlight so that the sunlight's hitting the back of her head. It's creating a nice rim light. You're getting that nice golden kind of edge glow around her, but not necessarily this light that's landing directly on her. So if you have control of that, I would say control that. Otherwise, it's a nice portrait, and I dig it. I think in post-production you can kind of warm it up a little bit. The top of the image is okay, but here where we have more shadows landing on the bottom side of the image, you can see her hands kind of drop to this kind of undead purplish look here, while her skin tones up here are fine. And that is something that's very normal. Whenever you're dropping from kind of brighter areas to darker shadows, you will get that look. You need to bring it out by raising the temperature in the bottom of the image with a graduated filter. All right, let's go on to our next one, Hunter Lives by Chili Wilson again. And Chili, this is a very creepy shot. It's very well done, I can say that. But you did it for your friend. It was in honor of the Total Recall movie, and I'd say you absolutely nailed it based on that. I don't know if I would want this picture for myself, because it is, if I had my baby Ethan coming out of my belly like this, it'd probably give me some nightmares. But I think overall you did a really nice job with it. The effects are great. Kind of the hint of blood and stuff. Everything you did works for the effect that you're going for. So there's not really much I can say from that perspective. From a stylistic standpoint, it's not something that I would do. But again, this is what your friend asked you to do. And so, hey, good job. You did exactly what he wanted. And not too much else to say about that. So let's go on to the next one. Here we have The Last Autumn Sunrays by Till Peterson. Now, this is a really cool shot, and I dig the lighting and kind of the overall look. And that's what you notice probably, Till. When you're taking the shot, you saw the lighting hitting these branches, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. The glow, the purple in the background, that's what works for this shot. Now, what I'm thinking that is kind of, it kind of makes this shot more of what I would refer to as B-roll footage, is that we don't really see much else that's interesting other than just kind of, a little bit of this edge glow on these branches. I don't know how you could fix that. You might be able to go closer or maybe pull back farther away so we can get a little more sense of the overall scene. But here's the thing, is that I refer to these things as B-roll because B-roll is something that we often refer to when we're doing film or shooting footage, is stuff that sets the scene basically. So in say a picture album, you might take a couple shots and you might have a nice big portrait of someone with a few expressions and stuff, and maybe to set that scene you take a shot of some of the details, like the the branches and the trees and flowers in that scene to kind of set the mood. This is kind of what reminds me of that. It doesn't necessarily stand well on its own just because there's not a lot of added interest in the subject matter. But as a scene setting image, I think it's great. So good job there. I think next time if you want it to be like standalone, then I'd probably recommend trying to find a more interesting angle or try and find something that can really keep the user involved in the image longer than just something that kind of sets the mood. But if it's meant just as kind of a mood shot just to set the scene, then I think it's great. I also like the production on it and everything. I think you did a great job there. Let's go on to Wedding Edit. This is by Harryman 2002. Now it says he shot, let's read that real quick. It says he shot a wedding yesterday, got started editing the photos, currently he's working on this one. Can't decide which he likes best. Now here's what I would say is I would definitely go with probably a black and white. I wouldn't go with either one of these. Number one, on this first one, you have a lot of pink tones, and skin tones like this draw a lot of attention, okay? And plus, it looks like she's actually naked because we don't have any sign of clothing. So when we shoot shots like this, you want to make sure that you actually capture some amount of clothing, unless she actually is naked and you don't want to show that. But when you don't show any clothing, it's going to look like she's doesn't have any clothes on. All right, so in this kind of a shot, the pink tones on her skin really draws a lot of attention. This highlight in the background draws a lot of attention, and I would say it's not an image that I would keep in color. Next, it's not necessarily an image that I would turn. I'm not a big fan of this whole kind of, I don't know what this is. It's like an antique toning where it kind of has mixtures of sepia toning and black and white. I would just stick with a traditional black and white with this type of shot. And what you really want to do is you want to lift out the shadows here because we have some kind of raccoon eyes going on underneath the eyes from the shadows cast above, and also on her cheeks and face. Lift out the shadows, kind of flatten out the highlights a little bit, and shift it to just black and white. And that's kind of the look I would go for. Now, as far as the shooting itself, how this was shot, it looks like you bounced off the ceiling. That's what I actually said here. And what I would probably say is bouncing off to a right or left wall might have been a little bit better here because it wouldn't have cast shadows directly down over the eyes. When people have more deep inset eyes, we want to make sure that we're filling them with light as opposed to catching them in the shadow from their forehead. So that's kind of critique on the shooting side. Also with your crop, again, make sure that you're showing some of her clothes. Make sure you're showing a little bit more because otherwise, yeah, she might not dig that she looks like she got out of the shower, not wearing any clothes. But other than that, great job, and keep submitting, Harryman. And is it Harryman or Harryman? I don't know. Harryman, either way. Hope I didn't offend you. Let's go on to this next one, Storm Inside by Thomas. This is our last and final one for this episode. This was, let's see, doesn't have any background information except that it's not a fake. Okay, I think this is a really cool concept. You are inside this room and you're trying to show that there's this crazy storm going on outside, but here's the thing is that we're pulled back so far that I can't really tell what's going on outside. Let's take a close-up look and see if there's really any more detail there to look at. I really don't see much more there. So that's kind of the problem is that with this type of shot, you're showing that we're inside and that there's a storm going outside, but we don't see it. And what I would do for this type of shot is get in close. Like if you want to show storm inside, maybe if you just cropped so that we could see just this area where there's just that stone area and that sky was a much bigger part of the image, it would have a lot more interest. If there was this area of the image and then you're able to capture a lightning, a piece of, not a piece of lightning, but what do they call it? If you're able to capture lightning actually occurring in the storm in that image, that would add even more interest to the shot because, it add extra, drama to the image and everything like that. But as it is right now, the crop and the composition kind of doesn't do it for me. It doesn't give me enough of that storm feeling outside. I want to see more of the sky, and that's what I'd recommend there. All right, so that's it for this session of Constructive Critique. Hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you guys in the next video.